A box falls. Photographs scatter across cold concrete. And in that single moment, a CEO's carefully constructed empire begins to crumble, because the trembling woman kneeling to gather those secrets isn't just another employee. She's a ghost he thought was buried 20 years ago, carrying proof of a night when powerful men chose money over a dying mother's life. Her name whispers a truth that could destroy everything he's built. His face drains of color as recognition hits like a bullet to the chest. Because some sins don't stay buried. Some daughters don't stay silent. And some truths are worth burning the whole world down to finally speak out loud. What happens when the past refuses to die? When a single mother with nothing to lose faces the man who has everything, except a clear conscience. In a small town where everyone protects their own, one woman is about to prove that truth is the most dangerous weapon of all. This is a story about choices that echo across generations, about the price of silence, and about what happens when someone finally decides that justice matters more than survival. If you want to discover how far one person will go to reclaim a stolen legacy, make sure to follow our channel, leave a like, and comment below telling us where you're watching from. This story will change how you see everything. The fluorescent lights of Dawson's Market hummed their eternal drone across the frozen food section, casting that particular shade of corporate white that made everyone look slightly dead. It was 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in Willow Creek, Oregon, a town so small that everyone knew which car belonged to whom, which marriages were falling apart, and which teenagers were secretly dating. The kind of place where a new face didn't just stand out, it screamed. Claire Dawson's hands trembled as she gripped the industrial mop, her knuckles bone-white against the wooden handle. She'd been working at the market for exactly 11 days, and every single morning felt like walking through a minefield blindfolded. Her daughter Emma's face flashed in her mind, those innocent 7-year-old eyes that trusted her completely, that believed mommy could fix anything. If only Emma knew how close they were to losing everything. Again. The storage room at the back of the market smelled like cardboard and desperation. Rows of metal shelving units stretched toward the water-stained ceiling tiles, each one packed with boxes labeled in faded marker, canned goods, September 2024, seasonal, Halloween, clearance, do not stock. Claire had been assigned the soul-crushing task of reorganizing the entire back inventory, a punishment disguised as responsibility, she was certain. The other employees had made it crystal clear she wasn't welcome. Whispers followed her through the aisles like smoke. Sandra from the deli counter refused to make eye contact. Mark, the assistant manager, watched her with open suspicion, as if she might stuff her pockets with expired yogurt at any moment. But none of that mattered. She had a mission here. A purpose that burned in her chest like swallowed fire. Claire reached for a box on the highest shelf, standing on her tiptoes even though her manager had explicitly told her to use the step ladder. Her fingers barely grazed the cardboard edge when she heard it, the sharp click of expensive shoes against linoleum. Her entire body went rigid. Travis Beaumont. The CEO himself rarely visited this location, one of 7 grocery stores he owned across the Pacific Northwest. But when he did, the entire staff transformed into synchronized robots, smiling too wide, moving too fast, desperate to impress the man whose signature appeared on their paychecks. Claire had seen his photograph in the break room, mounted beside a plaque celebrating 30 years of community service. In the picture, he wore that politician's grin, all teeth, no warmth. The caption called him a local hero and self-made success story. Claire knew better. She knew what that smile hid. Well, Travis's voice cut through the storage room like a blade through butter. The new girl. Claire, isn't it? She didn't turn around. Couldn't. Her heart hammered against her ribs so violently she thought it might crack through. Yes, sir, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been hearing things about you. His footsteps drew closer. Sandra says you keep to yourself. Won't join them for lunch. Mark mentioned you asked some interesting questions about the store's history. About my family. Claire's throat constricted. She'd been too obvious. Too eager. Amateur mistake. I'm just trying to understand the company culture, Mr. Beaumont. I want to do a good job. Is that right? The amusement in his voice made her skin crawl. Then tell me, Claire, why is a woman with your qualifications working stockroom inventory in a tiny Oregon town? Your resume says you managed an entire distribution center in Seattle. Oversaw 40 employees. Why the downgrade? Because I had to find you, she thought. Because I made a promise. Because some debts can only be paid in truth. Needed a fresh start, she said aloud, finally forcing herself to turn and face him. Travis Beaumont looked exactly like his photographs, but worse. 53 years old, silver threading through his dark hair in that distinguished way that men with money seem to achieve effortlessly. His suit probably cost more than Claire's monthly rent. His watch caught the fluorescent light, Rolex, naturally. But it was his eyes that made Claire's stomach turn. Blue and cold and utterly convinced of their own righteousness. Fresh start, he repeated, tasting the words like wine. Funny thing about fresh starts, Claire. They usually mean you're running from something. He stepped closer, invading her space with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. Or toward something. Before Claire could respond, her hand slipped. The box she'd been reaching for shifted, teetered, and then. Everything happened in slow motion and lightning fast all at once. The box plummeted from the top shelf, ancient and water-damaged and heavier than it should have been. It struck the concrete floor with a sound like a gunshot, and the bottom exploded outward in a cloud of dust and decay. Contents scattered across the floor in a grotesque display, decades-old photographs spinning like fallen leaves, yellowed papers fluttering, medical receipts creating a paper trail of secrets. And there, sliding across the concrete to stop directly at Travis Beaumont's perfectly polished shoes, was a hospital ID badge. Scratched plastic. Faded photograph. But the name was still perfectly legible. Travis Beaumont, Willow Creek Memorial Hospital, Volunteer, 2004. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound emerged. Claire's entire body went numb. She dropped to her knees, hands frantically gathering papers, photographs, receipts, trying to stuff everything back into the broken box even though she knew it was too late. Too late. 20 years of planning, and she'd blown it in 11 days because of a stupid box on a stupid shelf. Where? Travis's voice came out strangled, barely human. Where did you get this? His hands were shaking. Actually shaking. This man who'd built an empire, who'd shaken hands with the governor, who'd given speeches about integrity and family values, he was trembling like a child caught with stolen candy. Claire kept her eyes on the floor, gathering papers with mechanical precision. A photograph caught her attention, young Travis, maybe 19 or 20, standing outside the hospital in volunteer scrubs, arm around a girl with dark hair and a bright smile. The girl's face made Claire's vision blur with unshed tears. I asked you a question. Travis's voice had gone quiet now. Dangerous. Where did you get these things? Other employees were gathering at the storage room entrance now, drawn by the commotion. Sandra gasped. Mark pulled out his phone, probably already texting the group chat. By noon, the entire town would know something had happened. By dinner, the rumors would have grown teeth. Claire finally looked up at him, and in that moment, she let him see it, all the rage and pain and grief she'd been swallowing for 20 years. Let him see the truth burning in her eyes. I think you know exactly where I got them, Mr. Beaumont. His face cycled through emotions like a slot machine, confusion, fear, anger, and finally, recognition. The blood rushed back to his cheeks in a violent flush. No, he whispered. No, that's not possible. You can't be. Get back to work. Mark's voice boomed from the doorway, trying to regain control of the situation. Everyone back to your stations. Now. But nobody moved. The entire staff stood frozen, watching their CEO crouch down and pick up one of the photographs with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Watching him stare at the image like it was a ghost made flesh. Claire managed to gather most of the papers back into the broken box, cradling it against her chest like a shield. Or a weapon. Her heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe, barely think. Travis stood slowly, photograph still clutched in his hand. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made the air feel thick, suffocating. "Everyone out. Now. Sandra, Mark," I said out. They scattered like startled birds, whispers already beginning, speculation already brewing. The door closed, leaving Claire and Travis alone in the storage room that suddenly felt much smaller, much darker. The silence stretched between them like a physical thing, years of secrets and lies and buried pain pressing down until Claire thought her bones might crack under the weight. Travis opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "If you fail at this simple task, you're out," he said, but the words came out mechanical, rehearsed, a CEO's automatic dismissal. But then his voice broke completely. "Who are you?" Claire's lips trembled. She wanted to scream. Wanted to throw the box at his face. Wanted to make him hurt the way she'd been hurting every single day since she was old enough to understand what had been stolen from her. Instead, she took a deep breath and spoke the words she'd rehearsed 1,000 times, the words that would change everything. "My name is Claire Dawson. But 20 years ago, in the maternity ward of Willow Creek Memorial Hospital, when my mother was dying because someone made a choice that saved a reputation instead of a life," her voice cracked but she pushed through, forced the words out like pulling shrapnel from a wound. "My birth certificate said something different." Travis's face went from red to white to gray. The photograph slipped from his fingers, fluttering back to the floor. "Rachel," he breathed, and the name came out like a prayer and a curse all at once. "Rachel Morrison." Claire felt the tears finally escape, hot tracks down her cold cheeks. "My mother's name. The name you promised you'd never forget." She clutched the box tighter. "The name you buried along with the truth." In the fluorescent lights of Dawson's Market storage room, surrounded by boxes of canned goods and seasonal decorations, two people stood facing each other across 20 years of lies. And somewhere in that broken box between them lay the answer to a question that had haunted Claire Dawson her entire life. What happens when the past refuses to stay buried? Travis Beaumont was about to find out. The conference room on the second floor of Dawson's Market smelled like stale coffee and broken promises. Travis had practically dragged Claire up the narrow staircase, his grip on her elbow firm enough to bruise but not quite violent enough to cause a scene. The box, that cursed, terrible box, sat between them on the cheap laminate table like a ticking bomb. Through the thin walls, Claire could hear the muffled voices of employees pretending to work while actually pressing their ears against every available surface. In a town like Willow Creek, gossip traveled faster than wildfire, and right now, she could practically feel the rumors spreading through the store like spilled gasoline waiting for a match. Travis stood with his back to her, staring out the small window that overlooked the parking lot. His shoulders were rigid beneath his expensive suit jacket, his breathing controlled but audibly strained. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the kind of dangerous calm that comes right before a storm breaks. "Rachel Morrison died 23 years ago." Each word dropped like a stone into still water. "Complications during childbirth." "The baby," his voice caught, and he cleared his throat violently. "The baby didn't survive. That's what the records say. That's what everyone knows." Claire's hands trembled in her lap. She'd imagined this moment so many times, confronting him, making him face what he'd done, watching him crumble under the weight of his own guilt. But now that it was actually happening, she felt strangely hollow, like she'd spent so much energy preparing for this that she'd forgotten to save any for the actual event. "The records lie," she said quietly. "Just like everyone involved lied. Just like your family paid people to lie." Travis spun around, and for the first time, Claire saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not the calculated concern of a CEO worried about his reputation, raw, primal terror. "You don't understand," he said, moving closer to the table but not sitting down. "You can't possibly understand what it was like. I was 19 years old. My father," he stopped, jaw clenching so hard Claire could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "My father made decisions. I was a kid. You were old enough to sign documents." Claire's voice gained strength, fed by 20 years of swallowed rage. "Old enough to watch them manipulate medical records. Old enough to let my mother die believing she was nothing, that her life didn't matter as much as protecting some doctor's reputation and your family's precious name." The words hung between them like accusations carved in stone. Travis's face cycled through emotions too quickly to track: guilt, anger, defensiveness, fear. He grabbed the back of one of the cheap conference room chairs, his knuckles going white with the pressure of his grip. "How did you survive?" The question came out barely audible. "The report said, everyone said, that the baby died with the mother." Claire felt a bitter laugh bubble up from somewhere deep and dark inside her chest. "Almost true. I spent 3 months in NICU. Born too early, too small, barely clinging to life while my mother bled out in a recovery room because someone decided she wasn't worth the emergency intervention that might have saved her." She reached into the box with shaking hands and pulled out a medical receipt, faded blue ink on yellowed paper. "Do you know what this is? It's the bill for my mother's care. 47 minutes of deliberately delayed response. 47 minutes while they argued about liability and made phone calls to lawyers instead of doing their jobs. 47 minutes that killed her." Travis looked like he might be sick. He finally collapsed into a chair, his perfect posture crumbling. "I didn't know I didn't know you existed. After everything happened, my father sent me away. College in California. He said it was handled, that everyone had been taken care of, that," he pressed his palms against his eyes. "God, I was so stupid. So weak." Claire wanted to feel satisfaction at his breakdown, but instead, she felt something more complicated, a tangled mess of anger and pity and exhausted grief. She'd carried this weight for so long that it had become part of her skeleton, part of her DNA. And now, watching him crumble, she realized something terrifying: his suffering wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't bring her mother back. It wouldn't erase 20 years of foster homes and questions without answers. "There's something else you need to know," Claire said, her voice steadier now. She reached back into the box and pulled out a photograph, older than the others, edges worn from being held too many times. It showed a young woman in nurse's scrubs, dark hair pulled back, tired eyes but a genuine smile. "Do you recognize her?" Travis took the photograph with trembling fingers. His face went ashen. "Margaret Chen," he whispered. "The night nurse who was on duty when," he couldn't finish the sentence. "When my mother died," Claire finished for him. "Margaret was the only one who tried to help. The only one who stood up to the doctor your father was protecting. The only one who documented what actually happened at night before the records were corrected." "I remember her," Travis said, and something in his voice cracked open. "She testified at the internal review. My father, he destroyed her career. Made sure she'd never work in healthcare again. Threatened her family." He looked up at Claire with horror dawning in his eyes. Where is she now?" Claire's throat constricted. This was the part she'd been dreading, the revelation that made everything so much more complicated than simple revenge. "She's dying, Mr. Beaumont. Stage 4 lung cancer. She has maybe 2 months, probably less." She watched him process this information, watched the calculations happening behind his eyes. Guilt plus time plus mortality equals what? Redemption? Damnation? Something in between. Margaret Chen kept every document the hospital tried to destroy, Claire continued. Every memo, every original chart, every piece of evidence that proved what really happened. She kept them because she said someday someone would need the truth. She kept them for me. Claire's voice broke slightly. She's the one who found me 3 years ago. Tracked me down through the foster system. Told me everything. Travis stood abruptly, the chair scraping against linoleum with a sound like a scream. What do you want? The question came out desperate, almost pleading. Money? Is that what this is? Because I have money. I can. I don't want your money. Claire's voice cracked like a whip, and she stood too, both of them now facing each other across the cheap conference table in a grocery store in a town that loved secrets. I want you to understand what you took from me. I want you to feel what it's like to have your entire existence built on lies. I want. The door burst open. Mark, the assistant manager, stood there with his phone in hand, face flushed with excitement and fear. Mr. Beaumont, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here asking for Claire. Says it's urgent. Says, he glanced at Claire with something that looked almost like sympathy. Says their family. Claire's blood turned to ice. No. Not now. Not here. She'd been so careful, so precise in her planning. How had they found her? Travis noticed her reaction immediately. Who is it? Claire, who's looking for you? But she couldn't answer. Couldn't breathe. Because there was only one person who would track her down, only one person she'd been running from almost as desperately as she'd been running toward this confrontation. The past, it seemed, had more than one face. And some secrets carried secrets of their own. Through the thin conference room walls, Claire heard a voice from downstairs, male, angry, demanding. A voice she'd prayed she'd never hear again. Travis was watching her with new understanding dawning in his eyes, a horrifying realization spreading across his features. You're not just here for answers, he said slowly. You're hiding from something. Or someone. Claire grabbed the box, hugging it to her chest like armor. This conversation isn't over, Mr. Beaumont. Not even close. She moved toward the door, but his voice stopped her. Claire, whoever that is downstairs, whatever you're running from, he hesitated, then pushed forward. Margaret Chen. Where can I find her? Claire looked back at him, and in that moment, something shifted between them. Not forgiveness. Not understanding. But maybe the first fragile thread of something more complicated than hate. Evergreen Trailer Park. Number 47. But if you go, she paused at the door. Bring truth, not money. She's past the point where anything else matters. Travis Beaumont's home office smelled like leather and lies. The grandfather clock in the corner, a family heirloom that had witnessed 3 generations of Beaumont decisions, ticked away the seconds with mechanical indifference as Travis spread the medical receipt across his mahogany desk. His hand still trembled slightly, a tremor he couldn't quite control no matter how many deep breaths he took. It was past midnight. The house, a sprawling colonial on Willow Creek's most prestigious street, sat silent around him except for that damned clock and the occasional creak of old wood settling. His wife, Jennifer, had gone to bed hours ago without asking why he'd come home early, why his face looked like he'd seen a ghost, why he'd locked himself in his office with explicit instructions not to be disturbed. After 22 years of marriage, she'd learned when not to ask questions. Travis pulled open the bottom drawer of his desk, the one that required 2 keys and a combination lock. Inside sat a manila folder he hadn't opened in 2 decades, its edges yellowed with time and shame. His father had given it to him the day before he left for Stanford, pressing it into his hands with a warning, "This is insurance. Keep it hidden. Never speak of it again. What's done is done, and we protected our own." That's what Beaumonts do. At 19, Travis had been too terrified and too complicit to question it. At 43, staring at Claire Dawson's receipt, he finally understood he'd been carrying a confession all along. The handwriting matched. The dates aligned perfectly, September 14, 2001, stamped across both documents like evidence at a crime scene. The hospital billing codes, the doctor's signatures, the timestamps that told a story Travis had spent 20 years trying not to read. His father's notes were scrawled in the margins in that distinctive cursive, handled. Lewis agrees to amended report. Chen will be managed. Settlement terms confidential. Managed. As if Margaret Chen's destroyed career was just another line item in a budget spreadsheet. Travis's stomach churned with acid and guilt. He remembered that night with painful clarity despite years of trying to forget. He'd been volunteering at Willow Creek Memorial, fulfilling community service hours required by his father's political connections. It was supposed to look good on college applications, the wealthy Beaumont's son giving back to his community. He remembered Rachel Morrison. God, he remembered her. Dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, scared eyes, hand reaching out for someone who wasn't there. He'd brought her ice chips, held her hand when the contractions got bad, promised her everything would be okay because that's what volunteers did, they offered comfort and platitudes. He remembered Dr. Lewis, the hospital's chief of obstetrics and his father's golf partner, arriving 2 hours later than he should have. Remembered the smell of whiskey barely masked by mouthwash. Remembered the way Margaret Chen had confronted Lewis right there in the hallway, her voice rising with each accusation, "She's hemorrhaging. We need to move now. I don't care what the insurance says, she needs emergency surgery." And Travis remembered his father appearing like a dark angel, pulling Lewis aside, making phone calls, speaking in that tone that made grown men fold. Remembered being told to go home, that the situation was complicated, that sometimes hard decisions had to be made to protect people's futures. He'd asked which people. His father had looked at him with disappointment sharp as a blade. Our people, Travis. The ones who matter. Rachel Morrison hadn't mattered. Not to his father. Not to Dr. Lewis. And Travis, coward that he was, had gotten in his car and driven away while she bled out in a recovery room. The medical receipt blurred as tears finally came. Travis pressed his palms against his eyes, but the images kept coming like a film reel he couldn't stop. Claire's face overlaid with Rachel's. A baby that shouldn't have existed but did. Margaret Chen, dying alone with her truth and her documents and her broken career. His cell phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, "I know what you're looking at. The past doesn't disappear just because we bury it. MC." Travis's heart stuttered. Margaret Chen. How did she have his number? How did she know he'd opened the folder? Another text arrived, "Come alone. Tomorrow. We both know you owe me more than 20 years' worth of silence." Travis set the phone down with shaking hands and looked at the folder again. Tucked behind the medical documents was something he'd forgotten, a letter, sealed in an envelope yellowed with age. His name written across it in his father's handwriting. He'd never opened it, never even acknowledged its existence. His fingers fumbled with the seal. Inside, a single page, dated 3 months before his father's death 5 years ago. "Travis, if you're reading this, I'm gone and can't face what's coming. The Morrison case was handled wrong. I know that now. Lewis was drunk. The girl could have been saved. I made choices to protect our family's reputation, and I'm not sorry for that. But I am sorry for what it cost you, your conscience, your innocence, maybe your soul. The nurse, Chen, kept copies. I couldn't destroy them all. She's waiting, son. One day, she'll come for the truth. When that happens, you'll have to choose what kind of man you are. Choose better than I did. Dad." Travis read the letter 3 times, each pass stripping away another layer of the armor he'd built around his memories. His father had known. Had known for years that this reckoning was coming and had left him to face it alone. The clock struck 1 a.m. Travis stood on unsteady legs, moving to the window that overlooked Willow Creek's quiet streets. Out there, somewhere in the darkness, Claire Dawson was dealing with her own demons, whoever had shown up at the store, whatever past she was running from. And Margaret Chen was dying, her body consuming itself while she waited for someone to finally acknowledge her truth. Travis had spent 20 years building an empire on a foundation of silence. 7 grocery stores. A reputation as a community leader. Charitable donations with his name on plaques. All of it constructed over the grave of Rachel Morrison and the destroyed life of Margaret Chen. His reflection in the window looked back at him, expensive haircut, designer clothes, the face of success. But behind his eyes, he saw the 19-year-old coward who'd driven away when he should have stayed. Who'd signed papers he should have refused. Who'd let his father's money and influence by silence when he should have screamed the truth from every rooftop in Willow Creek. Claire had asked him what he'd taken from her. The answer was everything: her mother, her identity, her right to a childhood without questions and foster homes and the kind of abandonment that shapes a person's soul. And what had she taken from him in return? The comfortable delusion that the past stayed buried if you piled enough money and years on top of it. Travis made his decision then, standing in his office while Willow Creek slept and his wife dreamed in their shared bed and the grandfather clock marked time like a judge's gavel. He would go to Margaret Chen. He would face Claire's anger. He would stop running from a night 20 years dead but still breathing, still demanding accountability, still bleeding truth into the present. But first, he needed to understand something. He pulled out his laptop and searched for David Brennan, the name Mark had mentioned, the man who'd come looking for Claire at the store. What he found in the arrest records and restraining order files made his blood run cold. Claire wasn't just seeking justice. She was fighting for survival. And the box of secrets she carried wasn't her only burden, it was her only weapon against a man who'd already tried to destroy her once. Travis looked at Margaret Chen's text message again, then at his father's letter, then at the medical documents that proved Rachel Morrison's death had been preventable. Necessary. Managed. The word made him sick. He grabbed his car keys. Morning was too far away, and 20 years had already been too long. Some debts couldn't be paid in money. Some required something far more valuable, the kind of truth that burns everything down so something honest can finally grow in its place. The private investigator's report arrived at 7:23 a.m., delivered via encrypted email to Travis's phone while he sat in his car outside Evergreen Trailer Park, watching the sun paint the Oregon sky in shades of guilt and reckoning. He'd been there since 4 a.m, unable to sleep, unable to go home, unable to do anything but stare at trailer number 47 and wonder what words could possibly bridge 20 years of silence. Travis opened the PDF with trembling fingers. The investigator, a discreet professional his lawyer had recommended, had worked fast. Too fast. Which meant the information had been easy to find, which meant Claire's life was documented in the kind of public records that told stories of survival and struggle. Subject: Claire Elizabeth Dawson, née Morrison. DOB, September 14, 2001. Birthplace: Willow Creek Memorial Hospital, Willow Creek, or. Travis's chest constricted. September 14. The same night Rachel Morrison died. The same night his father had made phone calls and Dr. Lewis had signed amended reports and Margaret Chen had tried to save a woman nobody else seemed to think was worth saving. He kept reading, each line another brick of guilt pressing down on his lungs. Mother, Rachel and Morrison, deceased September 14, 2001. Father, unknown/not listed on birth certificate. Foster care history, ages 0 to 18. 7 different placements. 2 failed adoptions. 7 placements. 2 failed adoptions. The clinical language couldn't hide what that meant, a childhood of temporary homes and temporary families, of packing and unpacking the same cardboard box, of learning not to get attached because attachment meant pain when they inevitably sent you somewhere else. Travis scrolled further, his jaw clenching tighter with each revelation. Education, high school graduate. 2 years community college, discontinued due to financial hardship. GED completion program coordinator, Seattle, 2020 to 2023. Employment history, distribution center manager, SeaTac Logistics, 2021 to 2024. Termination reason: personal circumstances requiring relocation. The investigator had included a note: personal circumstances, refers to protective order #2024 SEA 08847 filed against David Michael Brennan, subject's former partner. Order includes 500-foot distance requirement. Subject relocated to Oregon to escape continued harassment after Brennan violated order multiple times. Seattle PD considered charges but victim declined to press. Travis felt sick. The man who'd shown up at the store yesterday wasn't just someone from Claire's past, he was a threat she'd been running from. And Travis's confrontation, his store, his town had somehow put her directly back in danger. There was more. The investigator had been thorough, maybe too thorough. Medical history, partial records obtained. Premature birth, 28 weeks gestation. NICU admission, 89 days. Developmental delays requiring early intervention services. Chronic health issues attributed to premature birth and complications. Travis had to stop reading. Had to close his eyes against the reality that Claire's entire existence had been shaped by that night, by those decisions, by his cowardice. She'd spent 89 days fighting for life in an incubator while nobody even knew she existed. While the hospital covered up her mother's death. While his father paid people to forget. The report continued with recent history. Current residence, Extended Stay America, Highway 26, Willow Creek, paid weekly. Dependent, Emma Claire Dawson, age 7. Employment, Dawson's Market, hired 11 days prior to this report. Financial status, checking account balance $847. No savings, $12,000 in medical debt collections. Travis looked up at Trailer 47. Margaret Chen was in there, dying, holding on to documents that could destroy everything he'd built. And Claire was living in a highway motel with her 7-year-old daughter, working stockroom inventory in his store, carrying 20 years of pain in a box while simultaneously running from a man who'd already hurt her enough to require legal intervention. The grandfather clock metaphor from his office came back to him, time as a judge's gavel, marking moments that demanded accountability. His phone buzzed. A text from Mark at the store: "Boss, you need to see this. Someone spray-painted Claire's car last night. Message says, go home liar. Police are here." She didn't show up for her shift. Travis's hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles cracked. The town was turning on her. Of course they were. Willow Creek protected its own, and Travis Beaumont was their golden son, their success story, their proof that small-town values could build empires. Claire was the outsider with secrets and accusations, stirring up trouble about things that happened before most of the current employees were even born. Another text from Mark: "Sandra's been talking. Says Claire's trying to blackmail you. Says she's probably working with criminals. Everyone's asking questions." Travis wanted to throw his phone through the windshield. Instead, he typed back: "Tell Sandra if I hear one more word about Claire, she's fired. Tell everyone that Claire Dawson is under my personal protection and anyone who has a problem with that can collect their final check today." He hit send before he could reconsider, before the careful CEO part of his brain could calculate the cost of taking such an obvious stand. Let them talk. Let them speculate. Some things were more important than reputation. The door to Trailer 47 opened. A figure emerged, small, hunched, wrapped in a robe despite the warming morning air. Margaret Chen. Even from 50 feet away, Travis could see how illness had ravaged her. She'd been strong when he last saw her, 20 years ago, standing up to his father with the kind of courage Travis had never managed to find. She looked directly at his car. Somehow, she'd known he was there. Had probably been watching him watch her trailer for the past 3 hours. Margaret raised one thin arm and gestured, "Come inside." Travis's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. The moment he'd been avoiding for 2 decades. He could start the car, drive away, go back to his safe life and his safe lies. Or he could face the woman his father had destroyed, the woman who tried to save Rachel Morrison, the woman who held the truth in her dying hands. He got out of the car. The walk to her trailer felt like walking to an execution, his own. Each step across the gravel parking lot echoed too loud in the morning quiet. A dog barked somewhere. A truck rumbled past on the highway. Normal sounds in a normal world where people didn't carry the weight of deaths they'd caused through cowardice. Margaret stood in her doorway, oxygen tube running to her nose, eyes that had once been fierce now dimmed by pain and medication but still sharp enough to see straight through him. "Took you long enough," she said, voice rough as sandpaper. 20 years I've been waiting for you to grow a spine." Travis opened his mouth, but no words came. What could he possibly say? Margaret stepped aside, making room for him to enter. "Well? You coming in, or you gonna stand there looking like your father, all guilt and no guts?" The comparison stung worse than any slap. Travis stepped into the trailer, into the smell of medicine and old coffee and the particular scent of a life running out of time. The space was small but meticulously organized. Photographs covered one wall, Margaret with family, Margaret in her nurse's uniform, Margaret receiving commendations before the Beaumont family destroyed her career. And there, on a small table beneath those photographs, sat 3 cardboard boxes identical to the one Claire carried. Each one labeled in Margaret's handwriting, evidence. Truth. Justice. "She looks like Rachel, doesn't she?" Margaret lowered herself into a worn recliner, wincing with the effort. Same eyes. Same fire. Same stubborn belief that truth matters even when everyone tells you to shut up and move on. Travis found his voice, though it came out strangled. "I'm sorry." Margaret laughed, a bitter, terrible sound. "Sorry. 20 years, and that's what you lead with. Sorry." She shook her head. "Sit down, Travis Beaumont. We've got a lot to talk about, and I don't have much time left to waste on your apologies." Claire's hands shook as she scrubbed the spray paint off her Honda Civic's windshield, the harsh chemical smell of the remover mixing with her tears and rage. The motel parking lot was nearly empty at 8 in the morning, just her car with its hateful message and a couple of long-haul truckers sleeping in their cabs, oblivious to her humiliation. "Go home, liar." The words had been there when she'd walked Emma to the motel's continental breakfast area at 7, her daughter's small hand tucked safely in hers. Emma had asked in that innocent 7-year-old voice that cut deeper than any knife, "Mommy, why did someone write mean words on our car?" Claire had lied. "Just a prank, baby. Nothing to worry about." But Emma was smart, too smart. She'd inherited that from Rachel, probably. The ability to see through bullshit even when everyone around her was drowning in it. "Are we in trouble again?" Emma had asked, and again had nearly broken Claire's heart because yes, they were always in trouble, always running, always one step ahead of David or debt collectors or the past that chased them like a hungry ghost. The police had come and gone within 20 minutes. Officer Martinez, a young guy who'd probably graduated high school the year Claire was born, had taken photos, filled out a report, and offered the kind of sympathy that came with an unspoken message, "Maybe you should leave town if people are this upset with you." He hadn't said it out loud, but Claire had learned to read the subtext in people's eyes. She'd been reading it her whole life in foster homes, in social workers' offices, in David's face right before his fist connected with her ribs. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, "This is just the beginning. Willow Creek protects its own. You don't belong here." Claire's stomach dropped. She looked around the parking lot, suddenly aware of how exposed she was, how vulnerable. Someone was watching. Someone wanted her to know they were watching. Another text, different number, "Saw what they did to your car. You got what's coming. Nobody messes with Travis Beaumont." And another, "My sister works at the market. Says you're trying to ruin a good man with lies. Shame on you." Claire's phone kept buzzing, 3 more messages, 5, 7. Anonymous hate from people who didn't know her, didn't know Rachel, didn't know anything except that their beloved CEO was somehow connected to the stranger who dared to disrupt their comfortable ignorance. By 9 a.m., Claire's phone had received 23 threatening messages. By 10, someone had posted her photo on the Willow Creek Community Facebook page with the caption, "This woman is harassing local businesses and spreading false accusations. Protect our town." The comments section exploded within minutes. "I saw her at the market. Something's off about her. Probably here to scam people. These outsiders always are. My nephew works there. Says she's been asking weird questions about the Beaumont family. Gold digger vibes. Someone should teach her that we don't tolerate this kind of behavior in Willow Creek." Claire sat in her car, watching her phone light up with hate from people who'd never met her, reading comments from folks who went to the same church where she'd been planning to enroll Emma in Sunday school. The small-town hospitality she'd hoped might give her daughter some stability had curdled into small-town mob mentality within 24 hours. Emma knocked on the car window, still in her pajamas, chocolate milk mustache on her upper lip. Claire quickly locked her phone and smiled, the fake smile she'd perfected over years of pretending everything was fine when nothing ever was. "Can we go to the park today?" Emma asked through the glass, her breath fogging the window. "Please. You promised when we got here we'd be normal." Normal. The word stabbed Claire right in the chest. What did Emma know about normal? She'd spent half her life in women's shelters, watching her mother cry in bathroom stalls, learning to pack a bag in under 3 minutes in case they needed to run. And Claire had brought her here, to Willow Creek, promising that this time would be different. This time they'd have a real home, real stability, a real chance at the kind of ordinary life other families took for granted. Instead, Claire had painted a target on both their backs. "Give mommy 10 more minutes, okay? Go watch cartoons." Emma's face fell, but she nodded and trudged back toward their room, number 127, with the flickering light fixture and the heater that only worked on the highest setting. $53 a night. Claire had enough money for maybe 2 more weeks if she was careful, if Emma didn't need new shoes, if the car didn't break down, if the universe would just stop punching her in the face for 5 consecutive seconds. Her phone rang. Travis Beaumont. Claire stared at his name on the screen, remembering yesterday's confrontation, the way he'd looked at those photographs like they were corpses rising from shallow graves. Part of her wanted to ignore the call. The bigger part, the part that had driven her to Willow Creek in the first place, needed to know what he wanted. "What?" she answered, voice sharp as broken glass. "Where are you?" Travis's voice carried an urgency that made Claire's skin prickle. "Are you safe? Is Emma with you?" The fact that he knew her daughter's name should have felt invasive, but instead, it felt like confirmation of something Claire had suspected. He'd done his homework. Probably had her entire life story downloaded and analyzed within hours of their confrontation. "Why do you care?" "Because David Brennan is in Willow Creek." Travis's words came fast, clipped with something that sounded almost like fear. "He checked into the Pine Lodge Motel last night. He's been asking questions at the diner, showing people your picture, telling anyone who'll listen that you kidnapped his daughter and he's here to bring her home." Claire's entire world tilted sideways. The chemical smell of paint remover suddenly made her nauseous. David. Here. In the same town. She'd been so focused on confronting Travis, on making him face what his family had done, that she'd let her guard down. She'd forgotten the first rule of survival: never stop looking over your shoulder. "Emma's not his daughter," Claire said through clenched teeth. "The restraining order proves. He's telling people the order was based on your lies. That you manipulated the system. That he's a father fighting for his rights." Travis paused. "Claire, he's good. He sounds believable. And combined with the rumors about you harassing me, people are starting to listen." Claire looked back at the motel room where Emma was probably watching SpongeBob, completely unaware that the monster from Seattle had followed them across state lines. Again. She thought of the spray paint, the threatening texts, the Facebook post. It all made horrible sense now. David hadn't just found her, he'd turned the entire town against her first, making sure she'd have nowhere to run when he finally made his move. "I've been talking to Margaret Chen," Travis continued, and something in his voice had shifted. The defensive CEO was gone, replaced by something Claire didn't quite recognize. "She told me everything. About the documents. About your mother. About what really happened that night." He took a shaky breath. "She also told me what happened to you after. The foster homes. The abuse. The system that failed you over and over again because nobody wanted to deal with the complicated kid born from a complicated situation." Tears burned Claire's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've been a coward for 20 years, and I'm done." Travis's voice strengthened with conviction. "Meet me at the market in 1 hour. Bring Emma. I'm calling a town hall meeting, and we're going to tell them everything, about Rachel, about my family's cover-up, about who you really are and why you're here. The truth. All of it." Claire's heart hammered. "You're insane. They'll destroy you. Your reputation, your business." "Good," Travis interrupted. "It was built on lies anyway. 1 hour, Claire. We end this together." He hung up before she could respond, leaving Claire staring at her phone in the parking lot of an extended-stay motel, watching her daughter through the window, feeling the weight of 20 years pressing down on her shoulders. 3 words had been spray-painted on her car: "Go home, liar." But maybe, just maybe, it was time to show Willow Creek what truth looked like when it finally refused to stay buried. The conference room at Dawson's Market had never held this many people. Employees packed in shoulder to shoulder, curiosity and suspicion radiating off them like heat. Travis had called an emergency meeting, mandatory attendance for all staff, plus an open invitation posted on social media that had brought half of Willow Creek's busybodies flooding through the doors. Claire stood in the corner with Emma pressed against her side, the box of documents clutched in her arms like a shield. Her daughter's small fingers gripped her shirt, sensing the tension even if she couldn't understand it. Around them, whispers hissed like steam from a kettle about to blow. "That's her. The one causing all the trouble. Heard she's trying to blackmail Mr. Beaumont. My husband said she's got a criminal record. Someone needs to call the police. She shouldn't be near children." The last comment made Claire's blood boil, but she forced herself to stay still, stay quiet. Travis had promised he'd handle this. She had to trust him, even though trusting men had never worked out well for her before. Travis stood at the front of the room, his expensive suit somehow looking rumpled despite probably costing more than Claire made in a month. His face was pale, jaw set with determination that looked like it might crack at any moment. Beside him sat 3 boxes, Margaret Chen's documented evidence of 20 years of lies. And there, in the back row with a smug expression that made Claire want to scream, sat David Brennan. He'd cleaned up for the occasion, button-down shirt, khakis, the costume of a concerned father rather than the monster who'd put his hands around her throat and told her she was nothing without him. He caught Claire's eye and smiled, slow and predatory. Emma whimpered. She remembered that smile too. "Thank you all for coming," Travis began, his voice shaking slightly before steadying. "I know there's been a lot of speculation about recent events. About our new employee, Claire Dawson. About accusations and confrontations." He paused, looking directly at Claire across the crowded room. "I'm here to tell you the truth. All of it. And I'm asking you to listen, really listen, before you make judgments." Sandra from the deli counter crossed her arms. "We don't need a speech, Mr. Beaumont. Just tell us if she's blackmailing you so we can call the cops and be done with it." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. David leaned forward, clearly enjoying the show. Travis shook his head. "Claire Dawson isn't blackmailing anyone. She's here because," his voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. She's here because 23 years ago, my family committed a crime. Not in the legal sense that would put us in jail, but in the moral sense that should have destroyed us." The room went silent. Claire could hear her own heartbeat, could feel Emma's grip tightening on her shirt. Travis opened the first box and pulled out a photograph, the one of young Rachel Morrison, smiling and pregnant and so full of hope it hurt to look at. He held it up so everyone could see. "This is Rachel Morrison. She died on September 14, 2001, in Willow Creek Memorial Hospital. The official cause of death was complications from childbirth." Travis's hands trembled as he set down the photo and picked up a medical document. "But that's a lie. Rachel Morrison died because Dr. Jeffrey Lewis was drunk when he arrived for her emergency delivery. She died because my father, Edward Beaumont, used his money and influence to cover up Lewis's negligence. She died because everyone involved chose to protect their reputations instead of doing the right thing." The silence in the room had weight now, pressing down like gravity suddenly doubled. Claire saw shock rippling across faces, Sandra's arms uncrossing, Mark's mouth falling open, the local pastor who'd been nodding along with the mob now looking horrified. Travis continued, his voice gaining strength from confession. "My father paid off hospital administrators. He threatened the night nurse who tried to report what really happened. He had documents destroyed and records altered. And his voice broke completely. I was 19 years old, and I signed papers helping him do it. I was there that night. I held Rachel's hand. I promised her everything would be okay. And then I got in my car and drove away while she bled to death because my father told me to protect the family name." Claire felt tears streaming down her face. Hearing him say it out loud, admitting it to the entire town, was somehow more painful than carrying the secret alone had been. "The official records say Rachel's baby died too," Travis continued. "But that was another lie." He looked directly at Claire now, and everyone in the room followed his gaze. "The baby survived. Spent 3 months in NICU. Was placed in foster care under a different name because my father wanted to erase any trace of what happened. That baby was me." Claire's voice cut through the room like a blade. She stepped forward, Emma still clinging to her, the box of documents balanced on her hip. "My name is Claire Elizabeth Morrison. Rachel Morrison was my mother. And I never got to know her because Travis Beaumont's family decided her life was worth less than their reputation." The room erupted in chaos. Voices overlapped, shock, disbelief, anger directed in multiple directions at once. But Claire wasn't finished. She'd carried this too long to stop now. "I spent 18 years in foster care," she said, her voice rising above the din, 7 different homes. 2 families who started adoption proceedings and then changed their minds when they realized I came with too many medical problems, too many questions, too much trauma. I aged out of the system at 18 with nothing, no family, no support, no answers about who I was or where I came from." She set the box down and pulled out the hospital ID badge with Travis's name on it. 3 years ago, a dying woman named Margaret Chen tracked me down. She'd been the nurse on duty the night my mother died. She tried to save her. She tried to report what really happened. And the Beaumont family destroyed her career, blacklisted her from every hospital in Oregon, and threatened her family to keep her quiet. Claire's voice shook with emotion. "Margaret kept the evidence. Every document my mother's death generated before they were corrected. Every memo proving the cover-up. Every piece of truth that Travis's father tried to bury." She looked around the room at the faces of people who'd called her a liar, who'd threatened her, who'd spray-painted her car. "I came here for one reason, to make someone finally acknowledge what happened. To get the truth on record. To prove that my mother's life mattered." David stood up in the back row, his voice dripping with false concern. "This is a very sad story, but let's talk about the real victim here, my daughter Emma, who's being subjected to her mother's obsessive vendetta. Claire has serious mental health issues. She's paranoid, unstable. Sit down. Travis's command cut through David's performance like a whip crack. Claire has a restraining order against you. You violated it by coming here. Officer Martinez. He nodded to the young cop who'd responded to the vandalism that morning, now standing near the door. I believe there's an active warrant for Mr. Brennan's arrest. David's face transformed from concerned father to pure rage in an instant. You don't know what you're doing, Beaumont. She's been playing you. The only person who's been playing games is you, Travis interrupted. I know about the assault charges in Seattle. The restraining order violations. The harassment campaign you've been running against Claire for 2 years. He pulled out another document, the investigator's report. Emma isn't your daughter. You dated Claire for 6 months and decided you owned her. When she left, you made it your mission to destroy her life. Officers moved toward David, who backed away, still sputtering threats and accusations. But his mask had slipped, and everyone in the room could see the monster underneath. As they led him out in handcuffs, Travis turned back to the assembled crowd. I'm donating $50,000 to establish the Rachel Morrison Memorial Fund for Women's Healthcare Advocacy. I'm working with Margaret Chen to submit all evidence to the State Medical Board for review. And I'm personally ensuring that Claire and Emma have everything they need to build a stable life here in Willow Creek, if they choose to stay. He looked at Claire, and in his eyes, she saw something she'd never expected to find, genuine remorse mixed with desperate hope for redemption. Some debts can't be repaid, Travis said quietly. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying. Claire stood frozen, Emma pressed against her side, surrounded by people whose opinions of her were visibly shifting from hostility to horror to shame. The box of secrets lay open at her feet, empty now, its contents finally released into the light. And for the first time in 23 years, Rachel Morrison's death meant something more than a line item in a cover-up. It meant truth. It meant justice. It meant her daughter could finally stop running. Travis Beaumont sat in his car outside Willow Creek Memorial Hospital at 2 in the morning, staring at the building where everything had gone wrong 23 years ago. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few vehicles belonging to night shift nurses and doctors who'd drawn the short straw. Fluorescent lights buzzed behind windows where people were being born and dying, where miracles and tragedies played out in equal measure, where choices made in split seconds echoed across decades. His phone had been ringing non-stop since the town hall meeting 12 hours ago. His wife had left 17 voicemails, each one more hysterical than the last. His board of directors had called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. He'd probably be removed as CEO by lunch. News vans from Portland had started arriving around dinner time, setting up camp outside his house, outside the market, turning Willow Creek's dirty secret into tomorrow's headline. Prominent businessman admits family covered-up hospital death. Grocery store heir confesses to role in medical negligence cover-up. Small-town scandal, the Beaumont legacy built on lies. Travis had read every article, watched every news segment, felt his carefully constructed empire crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. And the strangest part? He felt lighter. 23 years of carrying that weight had compressed his spine, hollowed out his chest, made him into a man who could smile at charity galas while knowing he'd helped bury the truth about a woman who died alone and scared and betrayed by everyone who should have saved her. Now the weight was gone, replaced by a different kind of crushing pressure, the consequences of truth-telling in a world that preferred comfortable lies. His phone buzzed. A text from Claire, Margaret's in the hospital. Not good. Room 347 if you want to say goodbye. Travis closed his eyes, pressing his forehead against the steering wheel. Of course. Of course Margaret Chen was dying tonight, hours after finally seeing justice acknowledged, her life's mission completed just in time for her body to give up the fight. He got out of the car and walked toward the hospital entrance, each step feeling like moving through concrete. The automatic doors whooshed open, releasing a blast of that particular hospital smell, antiseptic and fear and artificial air freshener trying desperately to mask the scent of human suffering. The night nurse at the desk recognized him immediately. Her eyes went wide, mouth opening as if to say something, but Travis held up a hand. I know. I know what everyone's saying. I'm here to see Margaret Chen. Room 347. The nurse's expression shifted from recognition to something softer, pity, maybe, or respect for someone visiting the dying. Third floor. Elevators to your left. The elevator ride felt eternal. Travis watched the numbers climb, 1, 2, 3, and wondered what he could possibly say to a woman he'd helped destroy. Sorry seemed pathetically inadequate. Thank you for not giving up felt self-serving. I hope you can forgive me assumed he deserved forgiveness he hadn't earned. Room 347 was at the end of a quiet hallway. Through the partially open door, Travis could see Claire sitting beside Margaret's bed, holding the old woman's hand, whispering words he couldn't hear. Emma was curled up in a chair by the window, asleep under someone's jacket, her small face peaceful in a way that made Travis's chest ache. He knocked softly. Claire looked up, her face streaked with tears but her eyes clear and determined. She didn't tell him to leave. That felt like permission. Margaret Chen looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, her body consumed by the cancer that had been eating her from the inside out. The oxygen mask over her face fogged and cleared with each labored breath. But her eyes, those fierce eyes that had faced down his father, that had refused to stay silent even when silence would have saved her career, those eyes were still sharp. She pulled the oxygen mask aside with a shaking hand. Took you long enough, she rasped, her voice barely audible. Been dying for 3 hours. Thought you might miss the grand finale. Travis felt his throat close up. Margaret, save it. She coughed, a wet, terrible sound that made the monitors beep in alarm. Claire gently replaced the oxygen mask until Margaret's breathing steadied, then pulled it aside again. Don't have time for your guilt. Need to tell you something. Travis moved closer to the bed, acutely aware of Claire watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, not forgiveness, not hatred, something more complicated that lived in the space between. Margaret's hand fumbled toward the bedside table. Claire understood immediately, pulling open the drawer and extracting 2 envelopes, one with Claire's name, one with Travis's. Both sealed with trembling cursive that had probably taken Margaret's last reserves of strength to write. For after, Margaret whispered. Read them when I'm gone. Both of you. Together. Her eyes moved between them, and despite the pain-etching lines across her face, there was something almost satisfied in her expression. You too, you're connected now. By truth, by pain, by Rachel's memory. Don't waste it. Claire's hand tightened around Margaret's. You should rest. Save your strength. For what? Margaret managed a weak smile. I'm done, honey. Fought my fight. Kept the truth alive when everyone wanted it buried. Saw you stand up and claim your mother's name in front of the whole damn town. She coughed again, harder this time. That's enough. That's a good death. No. Claire's voice broke completely. You can't, you're the only one who knew her. You're the only one who can tell me about her. About what she was like. About, the rest dissolved into sobs. Margaret's hand, so weak now it could barely lift, touched Claire's cheek. You are her, sweetheart. Every stubborn, brave, beautiful piece of her. She'd be so proud. Her eyes shifted to Travis. And you, stop punishing yourself and start fixing things. Real things. Not just throwing money at the problem. Travis nodded, not trusting his voice. Margaret's breathing was changing, becoming more labored, more irregular. The monitors beeped more insistently. Claire reached over and pressed the call button, but Margaret shook her head. No interventions. Let me go. She looked at both of them, her eyes already starting to glaze. Promise me, promise you'll read those letters together. Promise you'll help each other. Promise, she coughed, gasped. promise Rachel's death won't be for nothing." "I promise," Claire whispered. "I promise," Travis echoed, and meant it with every broken piece of his soul. Margaret smiled, a real smile this time, peaceful and accepting. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, Travis thought that was it. But then she opened them one last time, looking directly at him with sudden clarity. "Your father tried to stop me from keeping those documents," she said, words coming faster as if she was racing against time. "But there's something I never told Claire. Something I couldn't prove but always suspected." She gasped for breath. "The night Rachel died, there was another patient. Another woman having complications. Someone important, someone your father knew. Dr. Lewis had to choose who to save first." Her eyes bored into Travis's. "He chose wrong. And your father made sure nobody ever knew there was a choice." Travis felt the floor drop out from under him. Who was the other patient? But Margaret's eyes had closed again, and this time they didn't reopen. The monitor's steady beep became a single, sustained tone. Nurses rushed in, but Claire waved them off, having already seen the DNR order clipped to the chart. Margaret Chin died at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday morning, surrounded by the two people whose lives she'd fought to protect, leaving behind questions that would haunt Travis Beaumont for whatever remained of his carefully dismantled life. In the chair by the window, Emma stirred and opened her eyes. "Mommy? Is the nice lady sleeping?" Claire gathered her daughter into her arms, burying her face in Emma's hair, unable to answer. Unable to explain that sometimes people sleep and never wake up, that sometimes justice comes too late, that sometimes the good guys lose even when they win. Travis stood frozen, Margaret's final revelation spinning through his mind. Another patient. Another choice. Another layer to a lie he thought he'd finally understood. The two envelopes sat on the bedside table, waiting. And somewhere in the hospital's records room, Travis knew, there were more secrets still buried. More truths waiting to claw their way into the light. The Willow Creek Community Church hadn't been this packed since Mayor Henderson's funeral 3 years ago. Every pew overflowed with bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, townsfolk who'd come to gawk, journalists hunting for follow-up stories, and people who'd driven from Portland and Eugene after seeing the news coverage. The air was thick with anticipation and the faint smell of old hymnals and furniture polish. Claire stood at the front beside Reverend Patricia Mills, Emma's hand clutched firmly in hers. The weight of every eye in that sanctuary pressed down on her shoulders like physical force. 24 hours ago, she'd been the outsider everyone wanted gone. Now she was something else entirely, a symbol of injustice, a living reminder of the town's complicity, a daughter finally reclaiming her mother's stolen voice. Travis sat in the front row, looking like he'd aged a decade in 3 days. His wife Jennifer was notably absent, the divorce papers had been filed that morning, along with her statement to the press distancing herself from the actions and moral failures of the Beaumont family. The board had voted unanimously to remove him as CEO. His house was on the market. His entire life was being dismantled brick by brick, and he'd shown up anyway, Margaret's letter folded in his jacket pocket alongside the document that would complete Rachel Morrison's vindication. Reverend Mills cleared her throat, and the murmuring crowd fell silent. "We gather today not for a funeral, Margaret Chen's private service was held yesterday according to her wishes. We gather for something different. Something harder." She looked directly at Claire, then at Travis, her expression carrying both compassion and steel. "We gather to bear witness. To listen. To finally, after 23 years, tell the complete truth about what happened to Rachel Morrison." Claire's hands trembled. She'd rehearsed this moment in her head 1,000 times, but now that it was here, the words felt stuck behind her teeth. Emma squeezed her hand, and that small gesture of trust gave Claire the strength to step forward. "My name is Claire Elizabeth Morrison," she began, her voice shaking but clear. "And for 23 years, I've been searching for a story that started the night I was born." She pulled out a photograph, Rachel at 18, smiling, full of dreams. "This is my mother. Rachel and Morrison. She was 19 years old when she got pregnant. Unmarried, working 2 jobs, scared but determined to give her baby a good life. Claire's voice strengthened as she spoke, fed by years of swallowed grief finally finding release. She came to Willow Creek Memorial Hospital on September 14, 2001, in labor. She was alone. The baby's father had disappeared months earlier. She had no family, no support system. Just herself and the hope that the hospital would keep her and her child safe. The sanctuary was silent except for the occasional cough or shifting weight. Claire could see people leaning forward, faces reflecting shame and curiosity in equal measure. Margaret Chen was the night nurse on duty. She immediately recognized that my mother's pregnancy had complications, preeclampsia that required immediate intervention. But Dr. Jeffrey Lewis, the on-call obstetrician, didn't arrive for over 2 hours. Claire paused, letting that sink in. When he finally showed up, he was intoxicated. Margaret documented this. She called for a different doctor. She fought to save my mother's life. Travis stood then, drawing everyone's attention. His voice was rough with emotion when he spoke. I was there that night. Volunteering. I held Rachel's hand. I promised her everything would be okay. He pulled out the hospital volunteer badge, the one from the box, evidence of his presence. But I didn't know that my father had been called. That Dr. Lewis had contacted him in a panic. That there was another patient in crisis that same night, someone whose family my father knew, someone whose life he deemed more important than a 19-year-old girl with no connections, no money, no voice. The crowd erupted in whispers. Claire felt her breath catch. This was the revelation Margaret had left them, the final piece of the puzzle. Travis continued, his voice gaining strength from confession. Margaret Chen left us letters. In mine, she detailed what she'd discovered through years of investigation. The other patient was Senator Catherine Morrison's daughter, no relation to Rachel, just a cruel coincidence of names. She was having complications with her 3rd pregnancy. Dr. Lewis was her regular physician. When both women went into crisis simultaneously, my father made a choice. Claire felt tears streaming down her face as Travis spoke the words that made everything devastatingly clear. My father told Dr. Lewis to prioritize the senator's daughter. To delay Rachel's emergency intervention until the other surgery was complete. Rachel Morrison bled internally for 47 minutes while Dr. Lewis operated on a woman whose family had political connections and money. Travis's voice broke. My mother died because someone decided her life was worth less. The silence in the church was absolute. Claire could hear her own heartbeat, Emma's quiet breathing, the terrible weight of truth settling over everyone present. But here's what my father didn't count on, Travis said, pulling out a final document. Margaret Chen documented everything. And she also documented that I tried to stop it. He looked at Claire, tears flowing freely now. 3 days after Rachel died, I went to the state medical board. I was 19, scared, my father was threatening to disown me, but I filed a complaint. I gave testimony. I named names. Claire's knees nearly buckled. What? My father found out within hours. He used his connections to have the complaint sealed and expunged. He sent me to California for college with the understanding that if I ever spoke of it again, he'd destroy me. Travis handed the document to Reverend Mills. But Margaret kept a copy. She kept proof that I tried, even though I failed. Even though I wasn't brave enough to fight back when he shut me down. Claire didn't know what to feel, anger, gratitude, grief all swirling together into something too complicated for words. Travis wasn't the villain she'd imagined. He was something more human and more tragic, a boy who tried to do the right thing and been crushed by forces bigger than himself. I don't deserve forgiveness, Travis said, speaking directly to Claire now. I should have fought harder. Should have gone public. Should have been braver. But I was a coward, and Rachel died, and you grew up without a mother because I wasn't strong enough to stand up to my father. Claire looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the wealthy CEO who'd mocked her, but a man who'd been carrying his own box of secrets, his own weight of guilt, his own unresolved grief. She thought about Margaret's final words, "Don't waste it." "My mother died because the system valued some lives over others," Claire said, her voice cutting through the silence. "Because money and connections mattered more than humanity. Because people made choices that prioritized reputation over truth." She looked around the church, meeting eyes of people who'd threatened her, who'd called her a liar, who'd spray-painted her car. "But here's what I learned from Margaret Chen: truth doesn't die just because people bury it. It waits. It endures. And eventually, it demands to be heard." She reached into the box one final time and pulled out a document, her original birth certificate, the one Margaret had saved. "My legal name is Claire Elizabeth Dawson. But my mother named me Rachel Claire Morrison before she died. She never got to hold me, never got to see me grow up, never got to know that I survived." Claire's voice cracked. "But I'm here. And her story is finally being told. And that matters." Travis stepped forward, and after a moment of hesitation, Claire allowed him to stand beside her. "I'm establishing the Rachel Morrison Foundation," he announced. "Every penny from the sale of my house, my cars, my possessions will fund healthcare advocacy for vulnerable women. Margaret Chen's name will be cleared from every blacklist. And I'm petitioning the state medical board to officially investigate what happened that night, not just the cover-up, but the systemic failures that allowed it." Reverend Mills raised her hands. Rachel Morrison's death was a tragedy. But her daughter's courage, and Mr. Beaumont's willingness to finally face truth, that's where healing begins. She looked around the sanctuary. "Willow Creek, we have a choice. We can continue protecting comfortable lies, or we can do the hard work of accountability and justice." Claire looked down at Emma, who'd witnessed everything, the confrontations, the revelations, the collapse and rebuilding of truth. "Baby, do you understand what happened here?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Bad people made bad choices. But you and Mr. Travis are making good choices now. Grandma Rachel would be proud. Grandma Rachel." Claire's throat closed with emotion. Emma had never known her grandmother, but in that moment, Rachel Morrison became real, not just a tragedy, not just a cautionary tale, but a person whose legacy lived on in her granddaughter's words. As they left the church, Claire and Travis walked side by side, the box of secrets finally empty, its contents released into the light where they could no longer fester in darkness. Some stories can only end when someone finally decides to tell the truth. Rachel Morrison's story had taken 23 years, 2 broken people, and 1 dying nurse's refusal to give up. But it had ended the only way it could, with truth, accountability, and the fragile hope that confession might, someday, lead to redemption. The end. Claire Morrison walked into that grocery store carrying more than a box of old documents. She carried 23 years of unanswered questions, a mother's stolen voice, and a daughter's right to know the truth. She could have stayed silent. She could have protected herself and Emma by running, by hiding, by accepting that some injustices are too big to fight. But she chose differently. She chose to stand in front of the man whose family had erased her mother's existence and say, "Your comfort does not matter more than my truth." And in doing so, she didn't just reclaim her own story, she gave every person who's ever been told to stay quiet permission to finally speak. Travis Beaumont spent 2 decades building an empire on a foundation of lies, convincing himself that silence was the same as innocence. But Margaret Chen taught us something profound in her final hours: truth doesn't die just because we bury it. It waits. It endures. And it will eventually demand to be heard, no matter how much time has passed or how much power stands in its way. So ask yourself, if you discover that your success was built on someone else's suffering, would you have the courage to burn it all down and start over? If you were Claire, could you choose forgiveness over vengeance? Could you look at the man who took everything from you and see not just a villain, but another broken human being trapped by choices made long ago? Some stories stay with us long after they end because they force us to confront uncomfortable truths about justice, accountability, and the price we pay for our silence. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that every person's life matters regardless of their wealth or connections, then share it. Follow our channel for more stories that challenge us to be better, to speak louder, and to never stop fighting for truth. Leave a comment telling us, what would you have done in Claire's position? Your voice matters. Make it heard.